Hey everyone, welcome back. We've been hearing from a lot of guys in the community, and they're struggling with like how to be a good husband, how to be a good father, all that.
Right.
Especially like with everything
Yeah.
going on in society today. It feels like the old rules don't apply anymore, right?
Absolutely.
So we're diving deep today into building a better narrative around fatherhood
Oh, interesting.
by Conrad Riker, and it's specifically written for guys who identify with that whole red pill philosophy.
Okay, yeah.
Guys who feel like what society expects from men, just it doesn't line up with their like natural instincts.
Right.
They want to like reclaim their place as leaders, as protectors in their families and society, all that.
Makes sense. So, what's Riker's take on all of this? What's he saying?
Well, right off the bat, he says a lot of the rights and the dignity that men used to have, they're being eroded. He thinks modern society is kind of hostile toward traditional masculinity, and he's concerned about these narratives that are, undermining men's roles as fathers and husbands.
Okay, I see where he's going with this. And how does this tie into the whole covert contract idea we hear so much about?
That's a big part of his argument. He says men and women, we enter into these unspoken agreements in our relationships, but we don't always know what we're signing up for,
Right.
And he
Yeah.
thinks historically those contracts, they favored women, but now things are shifting, and a lot of men, they feel like they're getting a raw deal.
Yeah, that feeling of being taken advantage of or not being appreciated, I could see how that would lead to resentment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he sees this happening, especially with fatherhood. Like, society expects fathers to be providers and protectors, but also nurturers.
Yeah, it's a lot to juggle. Be strong but sensitive, provide but also be emotionally present. And don't forget to be the fun dad too, right?
Like, they can't win.
So how does Riker suggest men navigate these, conflicting expectations?
Well, he dives into what he believes are the biological underpinnings of all this. He says men, they're wired for leadership, for protection,
Okay.
while women, they're naturally more inclined towards nurturing.
So he's arguing that traditional gender roles, they're not just a social construct.
Exactly. He thinks it's rooted in biology and nature. He says, nurture plays a part, but you can't ignore nature.
And that's where things can get a little tricky, right? Because while there might be some biological differences, we also can't deny the influence of culture and
He
upbringing.
acknowledges that, but he really emphasizes the nature part. He says trying to force men into roles that go against their biology, it just leads to frustration and unhappiness.
I can see how some people might find that controversial, but let's hear him out. What else does he say?
Well, he doesn't hold back on, pointing fingers at what he sees as the problem. He calls out feminist and Marxist ideology.
Oh, okay.
He sees them as the driving forces behind this societal shift that he thinks is harmful to men.
So he's suggesting these ideologies are actively working to disempower men, especially within the family structure.
Exactly. He thinks they're promoting narratives that demonize traditional masculinity.
That's a pretty strong claim. I imagine that resonates with some listeners, but probably alienates others. It's important to remember that this is just one perspective.
Right, of course. We're just presenting his arguments here, not necessarily endorsing them.
Okay, good. So how does he see these feminist and Marxist ideologies, or these narratives he's talking about, actually playing out in the real world?
He points to media portrayals, like how fathers are often depicted negatively in movies and TV shows.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. The bumbling dad, the clueless husband, always the butt of the joke.
Right. And he thinks these portrayals, even if they're meant to be funny, they contribute to this broader narrative that undermines fatherhood.
Yeah, like the idea that men are just incompetent or emotionally unavailable, subtly reinforcing stereotypes, even if it's not intentional.
And then he gets into the legal and financial aspects of fatherhood.
Okay, what does he say about that?
He argues the system is stacked against men, especially when it comes to divorce and child custody. He says men are more likely to have to pay child support, less likely to get primary custody of their kids.
And that feeds into that feeling of injustice that, like, men are trapped in a system that doesn't value them, right?
Exactly. He really taps into that feeling that a lot of men in the red pill community, they talk about.
Makes sense. So he's painting a pretty bleak picture so far. Does he offer any solutions, any hope?
He does. He doesn't just complain. He actually has a whole section on what men can do to, like, reclaim their power, build a better narrative, all that.
Okay, that's what I want to hear about. What does he suggest?
We'll get into that in the next part. Don't go anywhere. So we're seeing how Riker, he lays out this whole system that he thinks is working against men, right? Like socially, legally.
Right.
But he doesn't just like complain about it. He actually offers some solutions. And one of the big things he talks about is discipline.
Discipline, huh?
And he's really specific about what he means. It's not about like being authoritarian or punishing just to punish.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It's more about like having clear boundaries, setting expectations, teaching kids the consequences of their actions.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And he really emphasizes that it's the father's role to provide this structure, to like lay down the law and enforce it.
So he sees that as like a core part of being a father.
Absolutely. He even goes so far as to say that like a certain amount of fear of the father is healthy.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's definitely going to be a controversial one.
I know, right? But his argument is that it like breeds respect and it teaches kids to be responsible for their choices.
Interesting. So it's about preparing them for the real world, in a sense.
Exactly. He thinks without that kind of firm guidance, kids, they become entitled, disrespectful, and they're just not equipped to handle the challenges of life.
I can see where he's coming from. It's like you need to learn to deal with consequences, with authority figures before you're out there on your own, right?
Right. And he talks about the importance of mutual respect too. But it's clear that he sees the father as like the ultimate authority in the house.
Yeah, like the head of the household, the final decision maker.
Exactly. He thinks kids need to understand their place in the hierarchy and that the father's job is to guide and protect the whole family.
Okay, so that ties back to the covert contract thing. Men reclaiming their place as the like leaders of the family.
Exactly. He thinks when men give up that role, it creates chaos, imbalance in the family dynamic.
Interesting. So it's all about restoring that balance, that order.
Right. And then he gets into something that's like not often talked about when it comes to men, which is emotional vulnerability.
Oh, okay, this should be good.
Yeah, he acknowledges that like the stereotype of the stoic, unemotional man, it's harmful.
Of course. Yeah.
And he says men need to learn to express their feelings in a healthy way.
So he's not advocating for like just shutting down all emotion.
No, not at all. But he's careful to distinguish between healthy expression and, what he sees as excessive emoting or being overly sensitive.
Okay, I see. So it's about finding that balance, expressing emotions, but not being ruled by them.
Exactly. He thinks men should be in control of their emotions, not the other way around.
Yeah, I can see that. Like being assertive, standing up for yourself, but not flying off the handle at every little thing.
Right. And he even suggests that, like, the feminist push for men to be more emotionally open, it's actually backfired.
Oh, how so?
He thinks it's led to men being shamed for expressing anger or frustration.
Interesting. And those are emotions that, everyone feels sometimes.
Exactly. And he sees them as, like, natural, even necessary in certain situations.
Makes sense. Like, sometimes you need to be assertive to set boundaries, and anger can be a motivating force for change too, right?
Right. He thinks suppressing those emotions, it can lead to resentment, passive aggressiveness, and ultimately a loss of true masculinity.
That's a powerful point. So he's advocating for like embracing the full spectrum of emotions, but in a way that's healthy and like aligned with traditional masculinity.
Exactly. And then he moves on to something that's super relevant today, which is fatherhood in the digital age.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The screens, the social media, the whole 9 yards.
He is not a fan. He's very critical of how much time kids spend on screen. He thinks technology is having a really negative effect on their development.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. There's a lot of research showing the negative impacts of excessive screen time, especially for young kids.
He sees social media, video games, even AI
Yeah.
as like tools that can be easily misused.
Yeah, leading to addiction, isolation, all that.
Exactly. And he argues that it's the father's responsibility to set limits, to make sure technology doesn't like take over family life.
So it's about finding that balance again, right? Using technology as a tool, but not letting it control you.
Right. He even says that excessive technology use is like feminizing boys.
Whoa, okay, that's a strong statement.
I know, right? He thinks it's making them passive, consumeristic, and lacking in the drive and ambition that he sees as essential to masculinity.
So it's about like pushing back against that, encouraging boys to be more active, more engaged with the real world.
Exactly. He wants fathers to like encourage their sons to do more physical activities, take risks, develop a strong sense of self-reliance.
Yeah, like those classic traditional masculine traits. So it's about instilling those values in a modern world, finding that balance between embracing technology but not letting it erode what he sees as the core of masculinity.
Exactly. And this all leads into his big message about building a stronger narrative around fatherhood.
Okay, so what's the takeaway there? What does he want men to do?
He thinks men need to be more vocal about their experiences, challenge the negative stereotypes, and reclaim their place as leaders and protectors of their families.
It's like a call to action, right? To step up and take charge.
Exactly. He's urging men to stop apologizing for being men, embrace their strengths, and fight for the recognition and respect they deserve.
It's about pushing back against what he sees as these forces trying to emasculate men and undermine the traditional family.
He's calling for a revolution almost, a return to what he sees as a more natural order, where men and women have these complementary roles and work together to create a strong, stable society.
And he's not afraid to be controversial, right? He takes on feminism, talks about how men are demonized, and criticizes the legal and social structures he sees as biased against men.
It's a provocative message. And I think it definitely resonates with a lot of men who are feeling disenfranchised and misunderstood.
Yeah, for sure. He's tapping into a very real sense of frustration that a lot of men are feeling these days. Whether you agree with him or not, it's a conversation that needs to be had.
So he's calling for action, but what does that even look like? How do men actually start building this better narrative?
Well, he says you got to start with yourself,
Okay.
with your own mindset and your own actions, taking responsibility for your life, for your family, for your role as a father.
So it's not about waiting for society to change or whatever.
No, it's about taking control. Create the change you want to see.
I like that. So what are some practical steps men can take?
Well, one thing he talks about is being a positive role model for your kids.
Okay.
Demonstrate the qualities you want them to have.
Like leading by example.
Exactly. It's not enough to just tell your kids to be respectful or responsible or whatever. You got to show them what that actually looks like.
Makes sense.
What else?
He also talks about communication. Creating a space where your kids feel comfortable talking to you about anything.
Even the tough stuff.
Even the tough stuff,
Yeah.
Have those family meetings where everyone can share their thoughts and feelings, work through problems together.
That's a good idea. I like that.
And of course, setting clear boundaries and expectations.
Right, which goes back to that whole discipline thing.
Exactly. He believes that, kids actually thrive when they know the rules, when they know the consequence. It gives them a sense of security. Yeah. It helps them build self-control, learn to respect authority.
And then there's the whole technology challenge,
Well,
right?
Yeah, how do you even handle that as a parent these days?
It's tough.
Yeah.
But he encourages fathers to be mindful of their own technology use. Set limits for their kids.
So create those tech-free zones in the house.
Exactly. And do stuff together as a family. Things that promote actual interaction and bonding.
Get back to basics a little bit.
And this is important. He also talks about building a support network.
Oh.
Surround yourself with other men who get it, who share your values, who understand the challenges.
So join a group or go to a workshop or something.
Exactly. Or even just, talk to your friends who are dads. It's about building that sense of community that.
I like that. And isn't there also something about the spiritual side of fatherhood?
Oh, yeah, he definitely touches on that. He thinks men need to connect with something bigger than themselves.
Whether it's religion or nature or whatever.
Exactly. It's about finding meaning and purpose and then passing those values on to your kids.
It's like that whole legacy thing.
Exactly. So yeah, ultimately, Riker's message is one of empowerment. He believes that men have the power to create the kind of families and communities they want to see.
It starts with taking responsibility, setting boundaries, leading by example.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
It's about stepping up and being the man you were meant to be.
If you're ready to do that, if you're ready to build a better narrative around fatherhood, definitely check out Conrad Riker's book. It's called Building a Better Narrative Around Fatherhood.
You can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. It's a really interesting read. Definitely challenges a lot of conventional thinking about men and fatherhood and all that.
Yeah, it's thought-provoking for sure. And it offers a roadmap for men who are looking to, reclaim their role as fathers and leaders in a world that's often trying to push them aside.
Yeah, it's a good one. Definitely worth checking out.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.